Okay, and we're back. So, next topic, we need to talk about how babies happen, specifically how their genetics happens. You might recall, again, from honors biology, that we learned about mitosis and meiosis, all of those fiddly stages. We're not going to worry about the details for this class, but remember, mitosis is the process of the cell dividing to make body cells, cells in your fingers, your eyes, your brain, your stomach, whatever. Meiosis is only for making gametes, which is eggs or sperms. It's a weird, distinct process because of what I just said in the previous video. Remember, you need an egg or a sperm to have only half of the total number of chromosomes, and it needs to be one copy of each chromosome. So one copy of chromosome 1, one copy of chromosome 2, one copy of chromosome 3, one sex chromosome, all the way down the line. It's totally random which copy of each chromosome is passed on. So if I'm making an egg, which aren't we all, I have a copy of chromosome 1 from my mom and a copy of chromosome 1 from my dad. It is totally random whether I give my kids mom's copy or dad's copy. The same for chromosome 2. I might give my mom's chromosome 1 and my dad's chromosome 2. I might give both from my mom. I might give both from my dad. It's totally random and up in the air. Because of that, we use what are called Punnett squares to show all the possible combinations that can end up happening when two people have a baby. So each parent has two alleles for eye color, right? One from their mom, one from their dad, but it's totally random which one is going to get passed on. They can't give the kid both because the kid's also going to get one from their other parent. So the way we show this in the Punnett square, let's say that I think by convention it's usually the sperm parent who goes on the top and the egg parent who goes on the left. Let's say sperm parent has blue eyes. They have two little b alleles for blue eyes. Egg parent has a brown allele, that's this capital B, and a blue allele, that's this little b. You can see the parent on the left, the egg parent, has brown eyes because that big B is dominant. We'll talk more about that in a second. For now, what we need to focus on is what's going on with this box. And it's basically a way to represent either the big B is going to get passed on in the egg or the little b. Can't be both. We have to pick one. So to show all the possible combinations, we put the big B next to this row, the little b next to this row, and then all the boxes that are in this row will represent combinations where that kid ended up with the big B from mom. Or the little b from mom will be this bottom row. It's harder to see with the sperm parent because they have two copies of this blue allele, so it's going to look the same no matter what. But this is one of the little b's passed on. This is one of the little b's passed on over here in the other column. So you can see that this box at the top left represents what happens if the egg contains a big B allele, a brown eye allele, and the sperm contains a little b allele. You end up with one big B from the egg, one little b from the sperm. Same thing with this one, except that, remember, sperm parent has two little b's to give, so you end up with a big B and a little b again. It's the same as the first one. If you look down here, this one represents this little b from the egg parent and this little b from the sperm parent, and whoop, they come together, you end up with a kid with blue eyes. These are not representing real kids. The boxes represent, like it says on the left, probable or possible combinations. This is not guarantees. It's not like if these two have 4 kids, they're going to get brown eyes, blue eyes, blue eyes. It's a possibility. It would be more accurate to say that they have a 1 in 4, a 25% chance of getting each of these boxes. And then you can add those probabilities up. So for example, we have two 25% chances of getting a brown-eyed kid, a heterozygous brown-eyed kid. That's 50%. Then we have two 25% chances of getting a homozygous blue-eyed kid. that adds up to 50%. So it's 50-50 brown eyes or blue eyes. Hopefully I don't need to remind you of this, but maybe this is something you haven't thought about before. Common mistake that people make is thinking that they're going to get these 4 in some order. That if they have 4 kids, they will definitely have 2 with brown eyes, 2 with blue eyes. It's not necessarily true. You can just get really a streak of brown eyes that you wouldn't expect. You can get a streak of blue eyes that you wouldn't expect. You'll see this sometimes families where theoretically both parents are carriers for sickle cell, say, will end up having several kids in a row who all have the disease, even though that should be a 1 in 4 chance. Or they'll get lucky and none of their kids will have the disease, even though there was a 1 in 4 chance and they had several children. So it's a flip of the coin every time as to what the kids get. There are some helpful videos in here. I won't go through this one now, but if you are finding that you need to see this in motion with more of the pictures moving around, please go and use the video to help yourself reinforce your knowledge. I won't be offended if you pause me. Okay, so I talked about this a little already. You might have heard about this in bio. There are 2 kinds of alleles, dominant and recessive. Dominant alleles are always represented by a capital letter. So this capital B is a dominant allele for brown eyes. Dominant alleles are alleles where you only need 1 copy. You can be heterozygous and still end up with the trait. So if you have a kid, or in this case a parent, who has a capital B and a little b, this one's brown, dominant, this one's blue, recessive, they won't end up with eyes that are half brown and half blue. They will end up with brown eyes because brown is dominant over blue. If brown is there, think of brown as being so much louder than blue that you can't hear blue at all. That's what we mean by dominant. So on the Punnett square, this parent has a brown eye allele and a blue eye allele. We don't see the blue eye allele at all. They will have brown eyes. The same thing is true of these kids who have 1 brown eye, 1 blue eye allele. They will show the brown trait because the brown allele is dominant over the blue allele. And to represent it being dominant, we represent it with a capital letter. Some examples of dominant traits would include brown eyes, having dark hair instead of red or blonde hair, or dwarfism. A lot of forms of hereditary dwarfism are actually dominant traits. Recessive, think of it as being the opposite of dominant. It's represented by a lowercase letter. It can be hidden by a dominant trait. So you have to be homozygous for that recessive allele for it to show up. Think of it as being, it's very soft. It can't talk very loudly. So if there are any dominant alleles around, you won't be able to hear it at all. It will not show. That means you have to fill up both of those spots, right? Remember, we're always going to have 2 alleles with recessive alleles so that there's no big loud dominant alleles to make a nuisance of themselves. So, for example, blue eyes. These 2 blue alleles are able to be heard because there's no brown allele to drown them out. And pretty much always, if you are showing a recessive trait, you're going to be homozygous for that trait. You're going to have 2 copies of it, because if you only had 1 copy, whatever dominant allele you had in the other spot would be louder and would shout out your recessive allele, and you wouldn't be able to hear it. I'm doing scare quotes with my fingers. Hear it. So in our example, the blue-eyed parent has 2 blue alleles. If they had a capital B, a brown allele, they would show brown like this parent does, like the brown-eyed parent. Examples of recessive alleles include things like blue eyes, blonde hair, and sickle cell disease is a recessive allele. If you have 1 normal copy of the sickle cell gene, so you have, it's a type of hemoglobin. If you have 1 normal hemoglobin gene, you will be okay. Even if you have that sickle cell disease allele hiding behind it, it won't really show up. It might show up in your kids if you have kids with somebody else who is also carrying that allele and those come together. But you're not going to have sickle cell disease yourself if you have only 1 copy of that recessive disease allele. So these are traits that skip generations. they can hide and then come back out in the family later when two copies of that allele happen to come together in a kid. Okay. If you want to hear somebody else explain dominant and recessive alleles, there's a video here to help you. Let's take a look at some Punnett square practice problems. I'll try to move through these a little fast. Please feel free to pause me at whatever point you need to pause me to work this out. I definitely recommend grabbing a sheet of notebook paper and doing this to try to practice and make sure you know what you're doing, or just do it with your fingers if you feel comfortable. Okay, so Patty is on the left, Patrick is across the top. Patty has blue eyes, little b, little b. Patrick has brown eyes, big B, big B. Notice that this is not the same as the one we just did. Our brown-eyed parent here is not heterozygous. They don't have that hiding blue allele, so they're not able to pass on a blue allele to their kids. So that's going to make this one different from the one we did before, where notice that our brown-eyed parent still had this hiding blue allele that they could pass on. It's recessive, so you don't see it, but it's there. Okay, so remember, Patrick can give either capital B or capital B, while Patty can give either little b or little b. How likely is their first child to have brown eyes or to have blue eyes? Pause me, take a second, think about it. Okay, so if you look at our Punnett square, here's Patrick at the top, here's Patty on the side. We take that capital B from Patrick and we put it in the boxes. Do the same over here. Then you take Patty's little b, you put those in the boxes, and you end up with every single one of their kids is going to have big B, little b, big B, little b. They're going to be heterozygous. So then we have to ask ourselves, what's the dominant allele? Because if you're heterozygous, the dominant allele is the one that's going to win. Remember, brown is dominant over blue. So all four of their kids are going to end up having brown eyes. It's 100% chance because they're all going to have the same combination. No matter how many kids they have, they should never end up with a blue-eyed kid unless Patty is sneaking around, which is a whole other story. So Patrick can only give that dominant brown allele. He's going to win every time in what their kids look like. That's what's going to show. All right, if Sam and Terry both have brown eyes, but each of them also has a recessive blue allele, so they're heterozygous, big B, little b, how likely are their kids to have brown eyes? How likely are their kids to have blue eyes? Remember, Sam can give big B or little b, while Terry can give big B or little b. So either one of them can give either option. Make sure when you're drawing the Punnett square that you go across. All right, here's the big B. Put one in each of these two top row boxes. Then go down, put the little b in each of the bottom row boxes. Then go down the columns. Big B here, big B here, little b here, little b here. So you should end up with this. This is a different pattern than any of them we've seen so far. Notice that they have 3 different possible combinations. You can have a kid with 2 big B's, a kid with a big B and a little b. That one turns up twice. Or you can have 2 little b's. So obviously this kid with just the big B alleles is going to have brown eyes, right? We know that. That's one for sure that's going to have brown eyes. What about these guys, our heterozygous babies? Which one is dominant? Since they have both, which one's going to win? Brown always wins. So this kid has brown eyes, this kid has brown eyes, this kid has brown eyes, but this kid only has blue alleles, so for them, the blue is going to come through. It's going to show because they have 2 copies. So you end up with 3 possibilities where a kid has brown eyes and 1 possibility where a kid has blue eyes. You might remember from biology, and I'm not going to test you on this, but it might help you. You can end up with what's called the same phenotype, the same outside appearance, without necessarily having the same genotype. These heterozygous kids and this homozygous kid are going to look the same on the outside. You can't tell by looking that some of them have this little blue allele hiding that you can't see yet. So this is a 75% chance of a brown-eyed kid and a 25% or a 1 in 4 chance of a blue-eyed kid. Now remember, if they have 4 kids, are they guaranteed to get 3 brown and 1 blue? No, they're absolutely not. They might have 6 kids and all of them have brown eyes. That's not as likely, but it's very possible. Same is true of blue. If they have 3 kids, they might get lucky and have them all have blue eyes. Sometimes it happens that way. So remember, probabilities, not guarantees. Okay, so I'm going to pause it here. There are tons and tons of helpful Punnett square videos that you can watch. There's one that's in the slides. There's more that are in my agenda slides. Just go on YouTube and type in how to Punnett squares. There are so many good options. This is not going to be something I'm going to test you on a ton this week, but next week I'm going to make you practice your Punnett squares a little bit until you're able to do these, because this is a very useful skill to have when we're talking about genetic diseases, like we will in another video or two here. All right, so go forth. I will see you again to talk about pedigrees in just a minute.